Charles, happy Father's Day.
Thanks so much. Same to you.
Well, thank you. I'm not a father, but I know you are, and we've got a lot of fathers in our audience.
Right.
And I certainly don't mean to rush you, but we do want to be on a tight schedule today for Father's Day.
Sure. So people could get and enjoy time this evening with their fathers. So
with dear old dad. So what we might do, Charles, in a rather abrupt move, is just go directly to slides after perhaps we comment.
Yeah, I think we can't let the art department escape being complimented because
Thank you again.
this is really, it's really, each poster seems to get better than the next. And we're picking today on Ted Turner and revealing, I think for the first time, why we believe CNN will never be able to cover, or may never be able to cover, the depth of depravity in the charity fraud. And that's in part because Ted Turner and his family have been intimately involved in perpetrating charity frauds, it would seem. And with Ted doing that, that provides perfect cover for the Clintons and the Obamas and other people to do the same sort of thing. And with all of those people doing it, it provides a perfect excuse for the three dastardly amigos, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, and their allies, say these billionaires are behaving badly, presidents are behaving badly, we're going to behave badly. Guess what? We have all the listening devices. We have everything to capture pictures and audio and print copies of all this stuff, so we'll hold all these things over the heads of billionaires and politicians, etc. Who's in charge of who? So this is a great graphic, and thank you for putting it together. I know you're making progress on the idea, anyway, of a coffee table book, and someday, who knows, we might actually have one.
Yes, this will be the week that I will further look into it. I also want to dispel any concerns about fans of bison steaks. We're not going to be going into that at all, despite the fact that Ted Turner, I believe, is the largest bison rancher in the world.
He is, and the second largest landowner in the United States of America.
But that Ted's Montana Grill,
it doesn't cut it for me. I've been.
No, it's not that good.
Yeah.
I have to say, I really wanted to like it, but it's just.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, let's jump into the slides as you suggest.
Exactly.
Stay away from the steak dinner.
Further ado, we don't have to address the bison issue.
So we've been laying these videos out now. This is our 163rd video. There is an enormous amount of criminal behavior to discuss here, and even more to talk about is why the authorities around the world have just said, you guys go ahead and do this, just let it get bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where it is now, where I think the malefactors, the perpetrators of these gigantic crimes, can't believe that Donald Trump may actually hold them to account, and they're hoping against hope, that he won't do anything about it. But I think the bats are coming out here.
Yeah.
And so the basic business model, we're going to go through it in a second, is that you create a charity that sounds good, like it's doing something, the good charity, or the Saving Children charity, or whatever, and you get celebrities involved with it, and you drum up this enormous demand for it. But the initial money that fuels this charity typically is in the form of appreciated stock. So if you're an entrepreneur like Ted Turner, you've been in business for decades, you've got stock that you might have paid $50,000 for that's today worth $10 billion. You can give $1 billion of that away.
Of stock.
Of stock. And instead of paying a capital gains tax on the 50,000 going up to $1 billion, or whatever the math is, 5,000 going up to $1 billion, you take $1 billion, you can take a deduction of $1 billion, but only in 1 year if your income, if it's a public charity, is $2 billion. In order to take it for a private foundation like Bill Gates, your income would have to be $3 billion, roughly. So this sort of approach of converting, at the end of your career, you begin to think about your legacy and really trying to help, and then an accountant comes along and says, hey boss, You want to pay no taxes for like a whole bunch of years and have this thing and still keep your stock? It sounds like a pretty good deal. In either case, whether it's a private charity or a private foundation or a public charity, it has to be separate from the creator, from Ted Turner in this case, or from Bill Gates. You can't say, what we're going to do here is just rearrange the deck chairs in my mansion and steal a whole bunch of money from the IRS and still hold on to the stock and nothing's really changed. That you're not supposed to be able to do. If that's exactly what it seems the Gates Foundation did, and what today we're going to focus on the Turner, Ted Turner's family, and a new foundation that we're going to talk about in some depth.
Overheard at cocktail parties around the nation. Hey, I know an accountant who knows a tiger who you might want to talk to.
Exactly. So the other thing that these false front charities are very useful for is if you need to pay a bribe to a foreign politician, you get that foreign leader or past leader involved with this thing, and you say, look, the way it's going to work is very simple. We're not going to, like have a press conference and say, today our foundation bribed you. We're not going to do that. We're going to announce, the foreign politician, insert name, the Blair Initiative, the Sarkozy Initiative, the African Dictator Initiative, whatever you want to call it, to save the children or help this roadway or change the climate or whatever. And we're going to announce a donation of our charity into, an initiative in your country. And you're going to, and we're going to say, we can count on you to make sure this money is very well spent. And the dictator or Blair or whatever will say, yes, you can, especially if you route it through my Swiss bank account or my Cayman Island account or whatever. So this sort of unregulated globalism and very loosely controlled complexity is a prescription for disaster. We're now going to show you, we spent a lot of time on the Clinton Foundation. Today we're going to show you how the Clinton Foundation marries up with a new foundation, and indeed with governments and with the US taxpayer and the State Department, to create all aspects of the United Nations with a very nice sounding, but I think in the end, fundamentally crooked foundation that began operations in January of 1998. So with that, we'll quickly look at, tease, we're not going to tell you the name quite yet. I noticed, Jason, you mentioned your viewership's rising. New viewers need to understand, viewers have been with us for now almost 2 years on this project. Understand this is a new approach. We are not just telling you what the truth is without giving you a chance to double check it. We want you to crowdsource the truth, to check these links, to send this around to skeptics of yours who may be disinclined to believe that anything could be wrong with the Clintons or the Obamas or complex charity frauds. We invite you to check all that stuff. And that's why on these slides, we give you links, we give you an ability to contact me on my site, Jason on Twitter, me on Twitter. If you've got questions or complaints, constructive suggestions, by all means, give them to us. We all make mistakes. I particularly appreciate getting short emails, like 100 words or less, especially if it's the first email. I do not read, thousands and thousands of words that come from somebody I don't know. I just don't have the time to do it. Yeah. But I very much appreciate people who send me pithy comments. And thank you to many of you who have gotten through to me with constructive suggestions that are helping so much in bringing these charity frauds to justice, because that's what we, this wider group, is successfully doing with the help of government investigators who have been very loyally watching this, I believe, around the world. Thank you, I hope, to the FBI and equivalents of the FBI in the key countries where large foundations and governments have unwisely sent hundreds of millions of dollars over years to these various Clinton Foundation frauds. I don't know if you put up the playlist, Jason, but for those of you, again, who are new, I got some humorous tweets from trolls last week who were saying, why don't you show us some evidence? So I sent a playlist to one of these trolls. That's not evidence. I don't see any evidence. And I blocked the troll. Yeah. But there's a tremendous amount. This is 163rd 2-hour on average podcast. You can see here that just the table of contents, the playlist has 20,000 views. So I don't even know how many views all these things would have at this point, but it's certainly approaching 2 million views. We do appreciate the audience, and thank you so much for circulating this around. For people who are new and want to see the whole Megillah, start 2 years ago and work your way forward, and you'll see that we've been systematically going at this from many different angles. The reason being that when the major governments do actually strike on this, a lot of people are going to be wondering, how could people have missed this?
Right.
And we'll be able to say, we actually didn't miss it. We've been warning you for a long time. And when you say you've gotten the malefactors in this, the criminals in this, are you sure you've gotten the full contours of this thing? Because unless you watch all this, you're probably not going to see the full contours of this fraud.
And very quickly, Charles, for people who are looking for evidence, I want to point out that with each episode, right in the video description, you may have to click Show More right here, but that will roll down all of the links that you need to download the presentation. Almost all of them at this point have got the PDF presentation with all the links in the video description here. You're also going to have the links that you need to support Crowdsource the Truth, which of course is a community-supported news resource. And if people are watching the show every week, I really hope they'll go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and sponsor the show so it can keep going week after week.
Good. So with that, we'll fly through some comments of what happened in the recent period on the next page. I put out, or the Last Refuge put out this first Twitter link, which is worth looking at. This is the site, or the person I think who does Sundance and all that. And this is a many-part tweet. We won't show you everything, but if you go into the link, you can see it for yourself. And it's basically suggesting that there's a chance that actually the swamp may win, that McCabe and Wolf, the guy in the Senate Intelligence Committee, all may have threatened to expose the top levels, if they really want to go after McCabe, if they really want to go after Wolf. And this is a tweet storm that is suggesting maybe that's going to happen in the end. We can't let that happen. The swamp, it's not like we can point to victory after victory since 1988 in the advent of unregulated globalism. We cannot talk about that. Yes, the Soviet Union disappeared, but was that transition handled the way we handled, for example, the Marshall Plan after we won World War II? I mean, we went in and we rebuilt Europe at our expense, at the expense of other donor nations. Instead of doing that when the Soviet Union fell apart, we basically pounced on the grave.
Yeah.
And we made the transition more difficult for those countries that had been in the Soviet Union. So we really need, I think, for our own benefit and selfishly for those of us who care about this country, we need to make sure that at this great moment of maximum building leverage, that we push Trump and we push the people around Trump and we push his allies around the world to open up and explain what was really going on under the two Bushes, under Clinton and under Obama, and explain why that's not happening in the future. Now, what's come out, again, this is another thing from Conservative Treehouse, there basically was not a basis for opening up the Russian hoax investigation. And people need to understand outside this country that the way the U.S. is supposed to work, it's not like some prosecutor sits around a bar at the end of a long day and says, who can we get next? I mean, you have to find evidence of a crime. You have to, a crime occurred, you have to believe that after doing some investigation, that there's a high probability that you're going to win a conviction against persons, be they corporations or individuals, for having committed real and serious crimes. That didn't happen here. This was, before the election was over, I believe that Barack Obama and his people and the Clintons figured out that they better have the, quote, insurance policy in the event that Trump won. They better have an ability to hobble his nascent presidency, stop him in the tracks, and make sure that he was a one-term president. And you're not allowed to do that. Barack Obama talked about how he was going to fundamentally change the United States of America forever.
We did that.
He certainly tried to do that, and that's why it's so important in this exercise. We've got to count on Durham and hope that there are other people like Durham who are really going to take a close look at how this investigation started, who was responsible for moving it along, why were so many laws and regulations broken, why was this allowed to go on for so long, who is leaking to the media to fan the flames here. And we've got to make an example, frankly, in this exercise that stands for decades that the United States of America, these are not our values. We do not train government resources of the magnitude that exist against our political enemies and rivals. That is not what we entrust elected officials with these great powers to do. So another great point here in Zero Hedge, we've made it before for months. Why in the hell does the Mueller report, this just focuses on Seth Rich, but why in Mueller's work, in thinking about this Russian investigation, why didn't he go down and examine why the DNC refused to turn over their actual physical servers to the FBI? Why didn't Comey want to look at those servers?
That should have been day one.
Yeah, and why didn't anybody wonder about who in the hell employed the Awan brothers? You know, and it just seemed to be, you're going to do a comprehensive investigation of what actually happened in 2016. These would be things that you would do immediately. And you certainly wouldn't issue, you know, how many pages was that report? 448 pages or something? That has nothing in it about these obvious areas. Now, that could mean, I doubt it's the case, but that could mean that there's a criminal investigation open into these issues. I have to say, you know, that I doubt it, because if there were a criminal investigation into these issues, it should have been finished a long time ago and culminated in indictments and convictions and incarcerations that we would have known about. But I think Zero Hedge raises a good point.
Yeah, and certainly in the case of Seth Rich, there was a lot of physical evidence that's been just totally kind of lost in the sauce, as it were. The Metro PD having no idea where Seth Rich's computer is. The FBI, they say the Metro Police say FBI has it. FBI says Metro Police have it. I say there's no investigation at all.
Now, you may not have seen this one, this other conservative treehouse, which, by the way, is a great site. They're saying now, this just came out yesterday, as a result of Roger Stone back and forth, the FBI is saying in court proceedings that they never saw it.
Wow.
I mean, this is like...
They never saw it?
Well, we don't have to look at that.
They're like, yeah, trust us. We made a report. You don't need to see it.
Yeah.
This is not the evidence you're looking for. It's the Jedi mind trick investigation.
But you're beginning to see it's like the same set of people, whether it's Weissman with the Enron Task Force and Arthur Anderson, or Mueller and the Boston bomber, you know, the Tsarnaev brothers, the Russians contact you and say you've got a problem, and Mueller says, okay, we'll go out and interview them. We'll let them know when we're coming, and you know, we'll bring them something nice, and we'll talk to them and conclude, oh, these are nice boys, nothing to worry about. I mean, I just cannot believe that the leadership, that the top veteran FBI people are this sloppy. This has to be the work of political hacks, you know, meddling in and deciding that, you know, we don't understand, we're not smart enough to see the grand genius of what Barack Obama's doing in league with Brennan and Clapper and Comey, and then in theory with the Clinton team. We just don't understand all the great good work that's going to happen once Hillary Clinton wins the rigged election. So you can't get in the middle of any of this. But I mean, this is indefensible.
We don't want to look at the primary piece of evidence in the foundation of the entire investigation. That's going to slow down the investigation. We got to barrel ahead.
We got to burn that report.
Wow. Wow. So that's really stunning.
Yeah.
The amount of money, time, political upheaval, international disgrace over. I can't show that nothing burger image enough.
And then, so then the question is this
virtual act of treason.
Yeah, so the New York Times ran a story that says that we're escalating our attacks on the Russia's power grid, and you know, how the New York Times finds this out. Is this true? Is it not true? There's a lot of discussion online about evidently it's possible that military bureaucrats may not have told Trump about this kind of stuff, and that's the kind of thing that I think, you know, I get the point of having plausible deniability, but I think in relations with superpowers, like, you know, China, nuclear-armed superpowers, the president needs to know everything. It shouldn't be some general sitting in Omaha, Nebraska who says, you know, we won't tell the president. The Russians might not like this too much, but we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We better not tell the president because we wouldn't want to embarrass him. Yeah, we'll tell the Times, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, so is it not true? We're not stepping up?
I don't know. This is fresh off the presses yesterday, and we'll have a lot of discussion in the next several days about it. But I thought it was relevant.
It's sort of like the time that Lester Holt announced a clandestine cyber war against Russia by the CIA, and I was thinking, does this guy know what the word clandestine means? He's talking about it on the news.
So I put out a little bit of a tweet, 10-part tweet here that people can read later. Got a certain amount of attention, and we're going to talk today at length about the first part of it, but I would encourage people to go through the 10-part tweet if they have time, and if they like it, please retweet it. You see that a lot of people are retweeting this. 493 retweets is a fair amount for me anyway. But basically what I lay out in this 10-parter is why I believe the mainstream media can't cover this Clinton Foundation fraud, because many of the people who are involved in mainstream media are conflicted because they either participated in the fraud, benefited from the fraud, or will be embarrassed to realize how badly they've been defrauded. So I take people through that, and I just encourage people to take a quick look at that if they have time. We can go to the next. Oh yeah, this is hilarious on BBC. So apparently, we're right now about 4 years from when Trump announced, and this is a rehash of. This is a story that rehashes the many people who were wrong, badly wrong.
The only person who got it right was Ann. What's her name, right?
Who?
What's her name? Ann. You know her.
Ann Coulter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got another chat attack happening, Charles.
All right. Well, if you get me into the main page, I'll talk while you
just
fight back.
Trying to stop the chat attack. People love to attack the chat.
Yeah. Let's not hit the political story. It's basically just a story that says that the Trump machine learned from the 2015-16 thing, and they're loaded for bear. This is an important story here that, again, would take us a lot of time to go through, so I just commend it to people's reading after the show. But this is by our friend Mary Fanning.
Oh, yeah.
A story that she has whistleblowers, and she believes these whistleblowers are confirming two important things. First, that the Quds Force in Iran was centrally involved in the Benghazi attack. And secondly, that we did have military assets that could have intervened to lessen the damage, and they were given an order to stand down. That's what this story alleges. It is filled with names, dates, places, and I'm sure it will attract a large amount of attention. But I would urge people to get to know Mary Fanning, who's done a lot of very good work, and her colleague Alan Jones. I think you know these people, Jason. And there's a lot of good stuff to read through and consider here. As I say, this story was sent to me yesterday.
The attackers of Benghazi were led by the Iranian. We're going to have to run this by the Moriartys. I feel like we did a show about this, and they said that they were mercenaries. I don't know that they said anything about them being from Iran.
Well, it'll be worthwhile. There's enough facts here that the Moriartys can dig into them and come back, and if this is wrong, let them explain why it's wrong. It does sound credible to me. Mm-hmm. And in my work with Mary, I found her to do very good work. So I just put it out there for debate and discussion.
It may well be right in line with what the Moriartys were saying, because perhaps the mercenaries came from Iran.
Good. So with that, maybe we can go back into the slide.
I think chat attacks are less effective than they once were.
So yeah, this is a story. Actually, Fabien, our friend, just sent me this story, although I had it in the slides before he did so. Apparently, foreign governments are sending lots and lots of money into our universities, and the universities are not disclosing, as they are required to do, the degree to which these foreign governments are doing this massive funding. And you're talking about China, you're talking about many Middle Eastern countries. This is from Luke Rosiak, and this is a big story. This is, most of the large institutions, educational institutions in the United States are in fact charities. They're abusing charity laws. Instead of educating students, they're enriching professors, they're enriching professors who have side jobs as investors or connected to investment funds. And there needs to be a very serious look at just exactly how much money, look at these amounts, $1 billion from Qatar, 761 from England, 600 million percent. I mean, this is massive amounts of money, and it's not being disclosed properly.
Where is that money going to?
Yale, Harvard, this
$1 billion?
Well, to many, many universities, and this is over 6 years.
Wow. It's a lot of
It says the Department of Education requires all post-secondary schools to report foreign gifts of $250,000 or more from a single source within a calendar year. Well, not only that, in the various, a lot of the educational institutions are regulated by departments of education in their state that exempt them from some of the typical reporting requirements, but then the Federal Department of Education has a rule which apparently these institutions are breaking. So go then to one final on this introductory slide here.
Sorry, some new wrinkle to the chat attack. It seems to have interesting, very interesting. Okay, so we go over here.
This is pretty funny. This final one here. There's a story here that President Trump is apparently turning some of these liberal comedians conservative. So he's making American comedy great again as well.
Who did he turn conservative? Not Colbert.
I don't know. But somebody wrote a study about it.
Huh.
Anyway, so with that, we'll go into the body of this presentation, and we have a lot of new facts to share with you.
Cool.
So first, here is for those people who want to get in the business of running a fraudulent charity. Actually,
I know somebody who's in that business.
Yeah, so here's the art of the charity steal. Right, we won't go through every point here, but people can look at it, they'll understand it. You say there's some global problem that only you can solve. And then you get people like a Nobel laureate or an actor or both involved. You then get friends that you can trust to be in on the game, to steal money together, and then not check, as you're supposed to check, all the aspects of the legal structure. And then what you do, if you're the Clintons, is leaving the White House, you make sure that you put people into the IRS, the justice system, and regulators, so you defang the regulators. We mentioned this trick of taking as donations shares of appreciated stock in companies, and that is a way, actually, of returning cash to the donor, substantial cash to the donor. What you do then is you say that you've got this problem, be it climate change or AIDS or whatever, and the most important step in this magic trick, this dark magic trick, is to make sure that you put an intermediary point between the public and the charity, and money first goes to the intermediary point, and then you divert as much money as you think you can away from the charity. That's the first step in the fraud, stealing money that you don't put into the charity. And that's a diabolical thing to do. People will justify it saying, well, currency fluctuations, expenses, it's tough to manage, I didn't know, there'll be all sorts of excuses. That's why a charity has to have a tight legal structure. The IRS understood that, at least in the past they understood it, the Justice Department understood it. The people who are in prison for charity fraud involving small amounts of money, they understand it. It's just the big celebrities who think they can get away with anything. So you divert money to slush funds, and then you turn around and you make grants to other leaky operations. You find somebody you can trust, you can say, I'm taking my climate change scam money and I'm going to give it over here to Elton John, whose people are not going to check carefully enough about what happens in his charity, and they're going to siphon money off themselves. Now I should mention and pick on particularly entertainment and musical celebrities, because it is quite commonly accepted in entertainment land and music land that nobody really knows what happens to the box office. Nobody really understands how much cash is actually sold in books and records and stuff like that, and whatever it is now. And so there's an acceptance in that celebrity world, and these are the biggest celebrities in the world with the biggest audience that nobody really knows. And I'm making a lot more money than I thought I should make, creating the opportunity for the legions of suckerfish around the world to steal money from this kind of a loose operation. The other thing you do in your charity is you say, I'll have my butler paid in the charity. I'll have, my maid, I'll have my chauffeur, I'll have my travel expenses and my hangers-on or whatever. We'll just give them checks out of the charity. And then what you do, the Clintons have done so adroitly, and others have done so adroitly, you then virtue signal around the world. You change the name of the charity to the Clinton Family Charity, and then you swan around the world to your adoring legions of audiences saying, aren't I wonderful? I've devoted my life to public service. And then naturally, fraudsters will approach you and say, well, we really want to help you out. How'd you like to have a piece of this deal or that deal, or have your daughter or son-in-law involved? And that's standard. It's wrong. It's got to be disclosed. And of course, they never do. And it happens across the political spectrum. So then what you do with all this global charity is you try to find nations that have underlying resources that have not yet been, and I use this word in a nice way, exploited. By that I mean harnessed for economic gain responsibly. You find politicians in those nations who don't have the capital to mine something or put up telecom or put in an infrastructure project, whatever, and you work out a deal, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, with these politicians that in exchange for approval to the cell license or resource extraction permit or whatever, in exchange for lenient treatment on that, the politician gets a black bag, that is to say the local politician gets a black bag filled with cash, and nobody checks anything. And this is just sad to say standard approach to life. And then what you do is you paper over this by giving a grant. As I said before, your main charity, this crooked charity, will then, out of the goodness of its heart, give a $50 million grant into, let's say, Rwanda or Haiti or whatever. And the only way to check what really happened in Rwanda or Haiti, whatever, is if the local politician and infrastructure allows you to check. And because they're going to be crooked, you're never going to find out what happened. Then, because actually these people who run the big institutions think they're really clever, but they have all these honor codes and ethical codes, and they can't comprehend, I don't think, to be charitable now, I don't believe these well-endowed, financially endowed institutions can comprehend the depths of depravity that operate in portions of the world where the economies haven't been developed, but there's a lot of intrinsic wealth to be extracted. They can't countenance it. So they're real happy when the phone call comes from the Clinton Foundation. We got a project in Ethiopia. You want to get involved with that? Oh, that sounds good. We could write papers about that. Somebody will get a PhD. I might get to be a professor. I'll be in all these journals. It's fantastic. We'll do it.
Open a strip club in Rwanda.
Exactly. And then, the media, the goal of the globalist media prior to this live streaming and podcasting and all that was to have stringers and operations in every country in the world. You'd never know where the next disaster is going to strike. So as CNN, you do need to have offices in 200 different countries. And as all the other big news organizations, you want all that. So
actually, Charles, there's a very accurate predictor that's been developed with regard to where the next disaster is going to strike. Just look for where the Clintons are going.
Exactly. Exactly. So the other thing, and I've actually observed this with GE, the best way to hide a fraud is to perpetrate a gigantic one and hide it in plain sight. Because the bigger the fraud, the longer it goes on undetected, the more likely the general public is to say, this can't be a fraud. If it is a fraud, it's been going on for 20 years and nobody caught it. How could that be? That's just the way most minds work. So with all this background in mind, let's go to the next slide.
Managed to block the porn scammers.
Okay. So back on October 10th, 1996, this is before Bill Clinton's re-election occurred in November of 96. Ted Turner, he was the mouth from the South, the maverick, had turned a small business into a gigantic business, which he merged into Time Warner, becoming a big shareholder of a blue chip company. He was a multi-billionaire. At a dinner in New York for the UN Association, Congress, the recalcitrant, I think at that point Republican-controlled Congress, refused to have us pay our dues to the UN, because people thought amongst Republicans, and I think still think, that the UN is hopelessly corrupt. So Turner got up there.
Do people publicly say that in the
Absolutely.
mainstream?
Nikki Haley has said it. Nikki Haley said it on her way out the door, her last ambassador. It's hopelessly corrupt.
Recalcitrant sounds like a new pharmaceutical sponsor.
So Ted gets up there at a dinner and says, you know what, the US owes $1 billion. I'll tell you what, I will personally pledge $1 billion to the UN. Now, whether he thought this through or not, I don't think I think you'll be able to figure out once I get through explaining this that he hadn't thought it through. But rather than go through, and he was a big guy at the top of his game, you know, I'm sure he's rightfully very proud of what he'd done to that point, it probably fell to somebody to figure out how to structure this. And rather than do it the way, you know, careful billionaires and careful people might do, rather than go to an independent law firm that could tell Ted, no, you can't do it this way, you have to do it that way, Ted came up with a brilliant idea, it seems, of using his son-in-law to structure this. Now, the actual structure, and I don't mean to rip up on the son-in-law, but I don't think he has that much in the way of charity experience. So the Articles of Incorporation, which are the defining part for any charity, U.S. charity, are purposefully omitted, in my view, from the UN Foundation site, website portal, and from many, many state regulatory sites. I managed to find these in England. I mean, if you hit this here, this link should come up. Yeah. Now, if you go down the page here and you hit registration over there, view PDF, here you have, scroll for a few pages through here. This is the entity they created, the United Nations Foundation. And this is a registration for some reason in the UK last year. They're registering it, I think perhaps to solicit, but if you keep going, you'll get to the actual registration papers, and the articles will keep going. It's almost there. Articles of incorporation are in what state would you guess, Jason?
Arkansas?
No.
Delaware?
New York.
Oh.
Which is tough luck for Ted Turner, because, you know, New York, if we go back to the beginning of it, here you see, these are the bylaws. Keep scrolling down. The bylaws come first. The bylaws don't matter as much as the Articles of Incorporation. They're the controlling document. Keep going down. And it's almost done. Oh, keep going. Sorry.
That's right.
Making your fingers do some work here.
I don't mind.
The articles are tougher to read. Okay, the next page. There you go. You see, this is a bad copy.
Nice facts.
But it's clearly a New York not-for-profit corporation. And why is that bad news for Turner? The New York Attorney General has been incredibly aggressive against Trump and has let the Clinton Foundation slide. This thing, these articles were signed on the 14th of January, 1998. We go back into the slide. The offices are supposed to be on the 28th of January, they're registered. The offices are supposed to, under New York law, be in New York County. And it's not clear what date. Shortly thereafter, they say that the principal office of this UN Foundation is in Washington, D.C. I don't think that's cricket. By March 3rd, 1998, there are records in Washington, D.C. that show the entity was actually organized then. But we have nothing on file anywhere of a Form 1023, which you absolutely have to have. When we see that Form 1023, we'll know when they claim the organization was actually organized. There's no determination letter issued, at least on file, both in 1998, when Ted starts making donations and taking tax deductions, and there's no determination letter issued in either 2002 or 2003 confirming that this thing actually was authorized as a public charity entitled to give Ted Turner and other individuals a donation of up to 50% of their income in a year. On the 10th of January 2000, AOL and Time Warner merged, and some people call that the absolute top of the bubble, depending on whether you view it top or bottom.
And top of what bubble?
The internet bubble. So back in 1998, 99, the market was superheated. AOL announced that an upstart company was going to merge in a deal that was valued at $165 billion, which is more than the GDP of a lot of countries.
Wow.
And everybody was all happy about that. Remember, Ted had made his pledge in 97 to put $1 billion into the UN based on the value of his stock and other assets, and then the market blows up, right? So a new name for us is a lady called Gro Harlem Brundtland. She was the Prime Minister of Norway 3 separate times. She was the first female Prime Minister of Norway. She was head of the World Health Organization from, I think, 98 to 2003. She joins the board of the United Nations Foundation and eventually becoming an officer. File that fact away. So this thing is supposed to, like the Clinton Foundation, be independent from its creators and a truly public charity. If we go to the next page. Okay, I believe I've been able to decipher what they actually said in the Articles of Incorporation, but without going through all the many red words here, the simple way to think about this mess is that this entity was set up to support a government, to support the United Nations, a collection of governments. Why should US taxpayers allow this foundation and donors to the foundation to gain tax benefits supporting the United Nations? Imagine that this were instead supporting the Russian Federation. Would we say, oh yeah, it's okay, you set up an American foundation, your donors can give appreciated stock to the American foundation and take a tax deduction off their American income so that the money from this foundation will go and assist the Russian Federation? There's no basis to do that. And I believe lawyers will sink their teeth into this and we'll get to see the whole 1023 and the actual timeline here. But I believe that this operation failed what was called the organizational test at inception in January of 1998. This is a crazy idea to do it this way. It violates other precedents for trying to have this type of a supporting organization work properly. And people can go make their own minds up. This, for example, if we hit this link here, is an article that's pretty well done that explains, warns about the pitfalls of setting up these type of organizations. And you clearly, when you do this kind of work, you have to make sure that the organization is, at a minimum, independent. It's not, if it's your money, Jason, and I'm your son-in-law, and we can't get together and put up an organization where you're the chairman of this organization that you're going to put the money in, and I'm going to be the secretary, and I'm going to get the paperwork right. That's not independent.
Well, better question is, who did you marry to become my son?
I don't know. That's for another day.
Yeah.
So if we go to the next page. All right, this is a table of all of the supposed cash and non-cash donations from 2001 to 2017 to this United Nations Foundation. And you see that it approaches, cash is 1.9, almost 2 billion, non-cash is only 326 million, a total of 2.3 billion, of which 238 million is from governments. Yet, in most of these years, as the Clinton Foundation did, there is not a detailed breakout in New York State, this is a New York corporation, New York law applies, of what these government grants actually were. Which governments gave grants to the United Nations Foundation and for what purposes? You're supposed to provide those details initially in New York, where this thing started, and through the life in New York, and then later when they start fundraising aggressively using widespread mail campaigns in places like California that have similar rules. So if we go to the next page. Now this is a little wonky, but we were able to retrieve the key data that helps you figure out whether this thing passed the crucial, what's called a public support test. In order for a public charity to actually get approval from the IRS to be deemed a public charity, that is, where its donors can take donations equal to 50% of their income in a given year, you have to pass, ideally you have to pass this public support test, which is granted, you're typically given conditional approval in the first letter that would have been issued in 1998 sometime, and then there's a 5-year test. So during 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, the charity is required to list out its total support, subtract its interest and dividends and capital returns, do worksheets up that they don't share with the public but should have for the benefit of the IRS that says how much of the money came from large donors. And depending on the time period and the approach that they took, you see that large donors, i.e. most likely Turner, only gave $300 million or so in this early time frame in 2002. But you see that in 2002, for the 5-year test, the public support requirement is 33.33%.
What is it?
33.33, and they're 16.05.
33.33?
It is indeed.
I'm not seeing that. Where is that?
It's half of that. It's less than half of it. In 2002, followed along in red there, it's 16.05. So this thing failed the public support test. I would argue if you fail the public support test, the IRS has latitude to let you through under what's called a facts and circumstances test, but I don't see how they would have passed that either. I think they passed this because Lois Lerner was in the department of the IRS that would have made this type of determination, and maybe other people like her were there. Ted Turner was in his prime. The value of his stock had fallen way down, but he nonetheless was still a billionaire. He controlled CNN, or was very much involved with CNN and other things, a big factor in media land. And you know, he was just given a pass. Now this is important because most likely Bill Clinton and Bill Clinton's people saw this and said, now wait a minute, you know, if Turner can do this, we can do the same freaking thing.
What's Jane Fonda doing later?
Exactly. And this is just an excerpt here from an article that underscores what had happened, that Turner did not fulfill his pledge on time. Actually, I wouldn't mind going back to that. It's all right. And the significance here is this article came out just at the same time that Bill Clinton's book on giving was published, right? Talking about how all the great work that Clinton was doing, and Hillary had announced for president, and Hillary was going to be the future, and don't get in the way with us. There's a big story to be told here, I think. Sadly, you know, Turner, I believe, has fallen ill either with dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. And I don't mean to attack him personally for this. I'm attacking the regulatory system that allowed this type of epic fail to happen, cost the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. people grievously by way of tax revenue, reputation, lay out a template that Bill Clinton and other people might follow. But this thing, in my view, and I've sent some tough questions into the United Nations Foundation, is a massive fraud. Now, if we go to the next page, I'm very much against the idea of initiatives. I think you should have charities or organizations that have authorized purposes. The second you start creating these weasel words that allow you to argue that, you know, I was meant to be a research center and archive in Little Rock, but my initiatives are going to take me into...
What is an initiative?
It's just
a vague word for a thing.
Yeah. So there's something called it's now called the Clean Cooking Alliance. It used to be called the Clean Cook Stove Alliance. Now, you know, it's kind of hard to come up with something. I mean, it's kind of hard to be against cleanliness. I mean, although I'm sure somebody will be. But they came up, they got fired up to set something up with the basic idea as follows: that for the 3 billion people on the planet who live on less than $2 a day, they are, if to the extent they're eating hot food, they're cooking in the bush using charcoal or maybe wood or whatever, and the conditions in which they cook create a lot of smoke. It's a dirty environment, and it's a bad idea. So let's give them a clean cook stove that will allow them to get rid of the smoke and have things work better, is the naive idea.
With an iPhone.
Exactly.
So you're in the bush, make sure you have a strong signal.
Right, exactly. But this thing, this is lifted here from that Clean Cooking Alliance organization website there. And like the Clinton Climate Initiative, there is no such organization. There's never been anything that I can find created in the United States of America where it would have to be created, called the Clean Cooking Alliance or anything like it. There are two organizations called the Clean Cooking Alliance of Uganda, different ways of spelling, but as far as I see, there is no such organization actually called the Clean Cooking Alliance. And we can debate, there have been various, there's 3 links here at the bottom to organizations that have been critical over time of this very construction of the Clean Cooking Alliance, but if you, let's see, yeah, but if you hit this, yeah, something should come up eventually. Is it down in the lower?
I think it's still
It seems like it's down here.
load. It says waiting for
Yeah.
cleancookingalliance.org. But don't we have cleancookingalliance.org right here?
Well,
There
yeah,
it is.
here's the progress report. If we just go down the page.
Progress is slow, I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, if you go down, if you download this progress report on the right there. Okay, and you go to the back. It's like 24 pages, I think. If you go to the very back, it lists out the people who are sponsoring it. I think it's...
Oops.
Where
is it?
maybe not. Somewhere else. Oh yeah, it's this page here.
Leadership Council.
This page,
This one?
18. Yeah. So you look at bilateral and all these different United Kingdom, Canada, Finland, the UK, the National Institute of Netherlands, Norway, OPEC, USAID, Department of State, many of these are governments, right? Yet the the actual Clean Cooking Alliance is housed within the UN Foundation, but there's no disclosures in the United Nations Foundation about how much money came from each of those governments, for what purpose, when, and to what entities were they sent. But here are all these different things that allegedly have said Shell Foundations, Tata Trust. I mean, these are all big people who obviously did no due diligence whatsoever on this operation.
Actually, we've got in the chat an excellent suggestion for the Cooking the Books Alliance, which would definitely be right up their alley. We could
Exactly.
have BKD heading up that alliance.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So if we go back into our slides,
Yeah.
if that's possible.
Oh, right, because that was confusing.
Yeah.
There we go.
So if we go to the next page. Now, this was announced as the Clean Cook Stove Alliance in September 2010 at the Clinton Global Initiative, which didn't exist on the day it was announced. It had been operating since 2005. Remember, Turner's announcement of a pledge was in September of 1997. As a guest, the Clintons noticed, wow, the publicity this guy got for holding a conference around the time of the UN General Assembly. We could do that. Why don't we have our conference at the same time? So they started in September 2005. They did not have a legal entity for the Clinton Global Initiative. Barack Obama spoke at the one in 2009, spoke at the one in 2010, and Hillary Clinton announced that the US government was pledging $50 million to this Clean Cook Stove Alliance in September 2010 at a meeting held in New York City where the Clinton Global Initiative had not yet been authorized as a charity and had an application in that was completely false. Of course, this could happen when Barack Obama was president and when Lois Lerner was head of the tax-exempt organizations department, as she was. So I sent this email on the 12th at 1:38 p.m. I've been sending other emails around. I wanted it out in the public domain. I do not expect the Clean Cooking Initiative to answer this email. So I sent a tougher email yesterday into the Chief Financial Officer, Walter Cortez of the United Nations Foundation, and if he doesn't answer, we'll put that email up next week. But this isn't a joke. This is a $2.3 billion false front foundation that now has this clean cooking initiative, and you think you're doing this. So what kind of a manager would you need for a clean cooking initiative? You need somebody who knows how to cook the books.
Exactly.
Who's done this before. So let's go to the next page and see who they found. Because there's been a recent transition.
Taking a guess here.
A lady named Dimfna van der Lans, who probably is a very nice lady.
I was way off.
But she worked with the Clinton Foundation as CEO of the Clinton Climate Initiative, something that doesn't exist. Just the thing, you got some...
CCA, Clinton Climate, oh no, that was
CCI.
CCI,
Yeah. So, and this is an excerpt from her About page on the Clean Cooking Alliance. When you look in the Who Is function on ICON to try to find anything to do with the Clinton Climate Initiative, all you will find is that a domain name was taken out 31 August 2006. When you look in Arkansas, you'll find out that fictitious names were taken out for Clinton Climate Initiative around 2006, but you can't set up a charity by just having a fictitious name. You have to change your articles of incorporation if you want to go from being a Little Rock-based presidential archive and research facility to fighting climate change with people with resumes like this. You actually have to change your organization, something they never did.
That's a lot of typing, Charles. Can't we just do it and hope that nobody finds out?
Exactly. So here is, if you hit this link down here, Open Corporates. Yeah, this is what happens when you look for the Clinton Climate Initiative, right? You get Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, but they registered a fictitious name, Clinton Climate Initiative, but that is not what's required here. And you would think that Bill, a lawyer, Hillary, a lawyer, Doug Band, a lawyer, all these lawyers around the Clinton Foundation would actually, go to the trouble of checking Arkansas law and federal U.S. law and other laws, say, I want to do something that's very different, operating, from Boston, which I think where they're doing this, and around the world with Ruby Shang in her office in Singapore, Clinton Climate Projects. I better have legal authorization for it one way or the other. And open corporates does not mean that you get everything that's registered around the world, but it's a good first port of call. And if nothing shows up in that for Clinton Climate Initiative, and you have all this other evidence that there is no such organization, chances are there isn't a real organization. Now, nonetheless, that doesn't stop the Clinton Foundation from saying in its most recent blurbs on its website that the Clinton Climate Initiative does do all sorts of stuff, bragging about it in marketing materials. You're not allowed to run a charity this way by just taking out the domain name for something and then presto change, say you have a charity. That's not the standard. You have to have articles of incorporation. You have to have come together with your directors or trustees independently from the creator, adopt bylaws, have meetings, make truthful declarations to the IRS and other state regulators and foreign regulators. They've done none of that. And the fact that this lady would take the job and then keep it on her resume just tells you that at minimum, she's not very cautious and not very familiar with how things actually are supposed to work.
Or she didn't go to the London School of Economics, so she had to fill up that LinkedIn profile as something.
Exactly. So now we're going to return to the scene of some crime, which is the Clinton Health Access Initiative. We go to the next slide. I am mindful of the time here, Jason.
You're racing through it here, Charles.
Yeah. So we have this issue which we've sort of been glossing over of whether the Clinton Health Access Initiative did reorganize itself properly after Donald Trump won the election in November of 2016. So here we have an audit from a firm, a local firm with offices in the Northeast called MHM that issues a supposed audit.
Is that Yee McGee?
That's the one in Portland, a different one. On the 5th of June 2017, claiming that effective as of 7 March 2017, the CHI board was expanded. This is lifted from their audit, direct quote, was expanded to 15 directors. That means there were 15 directors on the 7th of March, 2016. We're going to show you how many directors there were, and hint, it wasn't 15. All of whom are elected by the board as a whole. Well, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily independent if, you know, all of the people are in on this game of running a conflicted criminal foundation in violation of the law, covering up the truth. Note, it says here, Chai has not had any financial transactions with the foundation during 2016 and 2015. Okay? So then we go to the consolidating financial information prepared by the foundation's auditor, Cohn-Resnick, in the 2016 audit of the foundation. And I just put some key items out: the contributions of grants, other revenues, total revenues, program expenses, allocated expenses, total expenses, change in net assets. What were the net assets in December 31st, 2015? What were they December 31st, 2016? Now mind you, this audit was sent across state lines to many state governments around the world. It was in theory independent, and they say, Chai has not had any financial transactions with the foundation.
I have not had any financial transactions without foundation, Monica Lewinsky.
Right. So if you make it slightly smaller,
Depends on what your definition of transactions is.
right. I put the numbers out for New Chai on the left, and then the foundation, that's the total foundation. So you see, New Chai's contributions and grants were 70% of the total foundation. So the foundation claimed these grants as part of their activities in 2016. 70% of the consolidated results of the foundation were New Chai. 65% of total revenues, New Chai. Now here's a shocking thing. Both for New Chai and the foundation, the direct program expenses, which should generally be very high, you'd like to see them up 50%, 60, 70%. That's what you said you were going to run a presidential archive and research center. You said it was going to be in Little Rock. Direct expenses would be for that. Okay, here, a tiny percentage, I didn't do the math, but a tiny percentage are direct expenses, and they're just throwing a whole bunch of other allocated expenses to say that the total expenses of New Chai are 150 million, right? 20 million in direct programs, 130 get allocated. Well, how do you allocate? How do you divide up Bill Clinton's time? He's all over, he's on the board of, and Chelsea's as well, of both the Clinton Foundation and Chai. How do you split a trip, the cost of a trip in a private plane, expensive private plane with bodyguards and presidential suites, between New Chai and the foundation? Answer, you allocate it. And so just the act of allocating means there certainly were financial transactions between New Chai and the foundation in 2015 and 16. One accountant says there weren't. The other says that Chai was the most important piece of the puzzle. Indeed, Chai is the only entity that made any money. It had 3 million contribution in net assets, whereas the foundation as a whole had a $16.8 million effective loss, which means that the foundation without Chai lost more like $19.8 million. So then you look at the net assets. We had in the previous presentation last week, we talked about the fact that they were not authorized to get involved with an endowment, a general purpose endowment. That's exactly what they did do, starting in 2012. 2011-12, they were preparing for it. The assets started ballooning. A big piece of the net assets for the foundation there is going to be this illegally organized endowment. So when you look at this, I mean, clearly the folks at MHM either were told you can't look at the Clinton Foundation stuff, or they're crooked. But to say that there are no transactions, no financial significance of what was going on with New Chai and the foundation, when the foundation says, you know, actually, New Chai is our most important business by far. And business in quotes, the most important piece of this charity is this New Chai. So then the question becomes, who were the directors on March 7th, 2017? If we go to the next slide. Okay. Remember I told you about Gro Harlem Brundtland?
Yeah, very unusual name.
Now she, I think, likely figures in the degree to which Norway so actively contributed money to the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative beginning around 2004, when that entity did not lawfully exist. I think we're going to find when we pull on this that she was very much involved. the 2016 990 for chai was signed and I think sent out anyway on the 13th of November 2017. The requirements of our laws are strict, and you have to list out who were the directors of chai on that date. It's very specific. So Grow is not, Ray Chambers is, Chelsea Clinton is, Bill Clinton is. This lady, I believe, is either the current or former Minister of Health in Senegal. This gentleman is the richest man in Africa. He's worth over $10 billion. He's Nigerian. This lady is a UK person who's the Chief Medical Officer of the UK and has the highest public service rank that you can have. Her Wikipedia says that she did not get a high enough score to get into college when she took her exams. How she then, manages to rise to the level of being the top medical officer in the UK, I don't know. She's also going to take over as Master of Trinity College, Cambridge, which is a big honor. Mark Dybul is a professor at Georgetown. So these people are not on the board, but Paul Farmer is on the board. Mala Gankar is a famous hedge fund investor and prominent person based in London. Bruce Lindsay was the CEO of the Clinton Foundation. Alan Schwartz is a donor to the Clinton Foundation over years and a very well-known investment banker. He had been president of Bear Stearns when it blew up and went back in to work for Guggenheim Partners. Robert, misspelled, it should be Selander, is the former CEO of MasterCard. Our magaziner, we know. Tachi Yamada is a big gun from Japan who was actually head of the Gates Foundation's biggest piece of its business, the health business, in 2009. Maggie Williams is a longtime friend of the Clintons. All right, so what I've done here is anybody in red is somebody who has a fatal conflict of interest, in my view, in trying to review how this actually happened. So here they're saying in their audit that they reorganized the foundation on March 7th, 2017, and had 15 people as on the board March 7th, 2017. This shows that was not the case. So why is this important? It's important because the people who then join the board by the 14th of November 2018, they need to understand that they have likely been defrauded, either knowingly, either wittingly or not. They've been defrauded. They have not been told the whole truth about the Clinton Health Access Initiative and its predecessor operations going back to 2002. So if you're Aliko Dangote, worth $10 billion, thinking about listing your Nigerian businesses, which are vast, outside Nigeria in the UK, you want to understand who lured you into being a trustee of this Clinton Health Access Initiative. What were you told about the legal status of the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and how did they affect this reorganization? In their 990s on the right-hand side, they answered that they did, in fact, contemporaneously document meetings of the governing body and each committee. Okay, if they did, at the time these meetings occurred, show me notes that say that by March 7th, 2007, this thing was reorganized. You cannot have a situation, I don't believe in a charity, where you're allowed to shift your directors after the fact. March 7th happens and you decide that you want to say that you had a board of 15 people when you only had 9. You want to say the board was independent when it was ridiculously conflicted and non-independent. So you just wait until sometime in 2018, you lawyer up an agreement that says, we did this after the fact, we'll put you in as a director March 7th, 2017. Don't worry, you don't have any legal liability. I mean, I don't think you can do that. I think in logic, if you could do that, it would gut the notion that this was in fact an organization. It's just a collection of people who, some are in sometimes, others are in other times. There's no form to it if you allow this to happen.
Charles, Martine is saying that she remembers you saying that chai or new chai no longer exists. Is this still Charles's stance? Didn't you say that it never legally existed?
Yeah, it never legally existed. So there's in order to have an organization that exists, right?
Valid entity.
Is lawfully organized and validly constituted. you have to make truthful disclosures about this organization from the start. So what these people did is they began, this is in their website here, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, Inc. was founded in 2002. It's lifted from their website. No, it wasn't. Nothing was founded in 2002. There was no organization that we know of anywhere that was lawfully founded as something called the Clinton Health Access Initiative or a predecessor.
Well, nothing to do with these people. Probably stuff was founded in 2002.
Right, I mean, it's nothing called, supposedly they had an operation which they called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, they called it Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative, they called it Health Action Treatment Network, they had all sorts of different names for it, but like the Clinton Climate Initiative, like the Clean Cook Stove Alliance and Clean Cooking Alliance, you don't create an organization by paying $20 to get an internet domain name. That's not creating an organization. You have just simply, acquired the right to use a name. When you start soliciting money in the name of an organization that doesn't exist, using the mail, using the internet, across state lines, across national boundaries, you're committing massive fraud when you do that. Each request for an organization that doesn't really exist, that you claim you have the legal authority to accept money and then spend money to further a purpose for which you're not organized, that's serious crime.
Even if it has a secret handshake
Exactly, especially if it
doesn't fly.
does not cut
They
it.
didn't know. They did more good than bad.
Right. So when we look at this, in particular, I mean, everybody should be rather upset here looking at this, because if you believe that this collection of insiders is strong enough to stop the Trump train and stop the inquiries which are ongoing now in many different nations from getting to the bottom, exposing the truth, if you believe that you could just stuff all inquiries, squelch them, and nobody's ever going to check all this, I suppose you can sleep well at night. But if, on the other hand, you reach the conclusion, having watched some of our 163 videos and podcasts, and considering our slides, considering the fact that we have not gotten a single statement from anybody that we're wrong, and consider the fact that there are multiple stories in multiple press accounts, multiple media, that there are active FBI, IRS, and other investigations into this growing collection of frauds, then what you should be asking yourself is, who lied to you? Who got you into this mess? Who caused you, who squeezed your arm, who reassured you that this was all right? And chances are all roads will lead back to the first stupid accounting firm that got involved here, which is BKD. BKD should never have issued an audit. Indeed, they should pull any of the professional work that they have issued that is now circulating in the public domain, because that work forms the basis for Price Waterhouse and then for MHM and others, Cohn Resnick. The work that BKD did and that it continues to allow circulating in the public domain is the leg that these other accounting firms will stand on when they say, well, we thought BKD got it right.
Yeah.
And the longer they continue to allow this mess to be out there, the more liability BKD is buying, and the more the people who are on the board, this board and other board, are going to say, wait a minute, we're going to start pointing fingers at one another. We'll point fingers at the accounting firm. The accounting firm will say, no, wait a minute. We have letters back from Andrew Kessel and from the CEO of various bits and pieces of the Clinton Foundation swearing that these numbers are management's responsibility and they're true and accurate, and any material problems they've made known to us. So you're going to start having, I think, not a circular firing squad, but
finger pointing for sure.
Well, bullet pointing. I mean, it's good, not figurative bullets. I mean, this is a long-standing pattern and practice of reckless deceit, frankly, there's a book out, Reckless Endangerment, but allowing people who are lying people, no, I didn't say lying, I said lying people, to say that while they were supposed to be based in Little Rock, while they were supposed to be a research facility and a presidential archive, that instead of doing that, they're going to run around the world fighting climate change and distributing adulterated AIDS drugs, and that you can do this for years and years and years with billions and billions of dollars, to do it.
And basing the initiative on lies, like we got to fight climate change by getting rid of carbon dioxide.
Right.
No, that's not going to fire.
So you asked me to see whether I could get this moving along.
You did.
We've moved it at warp speed.
Warp speed, Charles. Actually, I saw a video. NASA is apparently working on an actual warp speed engine, but I think with the 50th anniversary of the moon landing approaching, there are viewers in our audience who will say the warp speed engine is a hoax. I think it's interesting. Well, the revelations with Ted Turner certainly should be a stunner for some people who are watching today. It's interesting, Charles, because it starts to reveal how these things make their way into media. You know, you've got Ted Turner involved. He's going to have a lot of... When did he sell CNN?
Well, he merged Turner into Time Warner in '96, and then AOL Time Warner January 2001, and then it was just recently AT&T just bought the remnant. But
I'm sure they're all sitting on the board of directors with the same people and their friends, and even if he doesn't own it, there's influence over it.
Well, what this shows, and in the tweet storm, what I point out is, if you have Ted Turner and his team are very much, and the people in the United Nations Foundation are very much ardent globalists, particularly unregulated globalists. So you have on that board now, you have a man, we've talked about him before, Muhammad Yunus, a Bangladeshi who created Grameen Bank, which I think is a fraud. And of course, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. He figures in a lot of the Wikipedia discussions. WikiLeaks discussion that his operation was deemed to be so crooked in Bangladesh that the Bangladeshi government took it over. There has to be some kind of crooked
in Bangladesh.
some kind of crooked, and so there's a lot of emails back and forth in the WikiLeaks about how Hillary's trying to protect. Indeed, Hillary threatened. It is alleged threatened the Prime Minister of Bangladesh with taking away a gigantic World Bank loan if they continued with this assault against somebody who I think should probably be in prison and have to send back his Nobel Peace Prize money and his accolades.
I'll tell you, Charles, I think that Nobel Peace Prize is a sham that they just give to losers and criminals who they want to make look good.
Yeah, it's a sham-wow, whatever.
It's a sham wow. That guy got arrested for beating up a hooker or something. I think that had a negative impact on sales.
Yeah, and so in certain quarters. And so we've talked jokingly about this Ortell's first law. When you put any name associated with the Clintons into Google with the word fraud, you're going to find something interesting. So when you go down the list of people who are on the United Nations Foundation, I'm sure there's some fine people on it. I noticed the Queen of Jordan is prominently named in there, but there's a fellow I think is connected to the co-founding of Infosys in India, and that's a company that had to announce some massive problems with their financial statements or restatements. So there's a lot of warning signs for fraud in this whole Clinton Foundation history. I think when you overlay the evolution of the United Nations Foundation, then some of these other United Nations operations, into how the Clinton Foundation went off course from being supposedly in Little Rock to being based and directed fundamentally from New York, you begin to see how these things all come together. At one point, people used to joke about CNN calling it the Clinton News Network. I mean, they're very, very close.
Yes. It's all laid out right here, Charles. Well, Charles, that was just expertly sped through the Evelyn Wood School of Sunday with Charles. But it gives everyone time to go spend some time with their dad on Father's Day. Want to wish all the fathers out there a happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, Charles. And thanks to all of the sponsors of the show that allows the show to carry on. If you're watching each week and you've not yet become a sponsor, please go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a monthly sponsor. Sponsors at $10 and higher are still getting that Sunday with Charles screensaver. I promise I will go find out about the coffee table book And I think we got to make a volume 2 of the Screensaver soon. So now's the time to get on as a sponsor. You can do a one-time sponsorship at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. Happy Father's Day to everyone. Thanks for watching. We got a little bit of a concise Sunday with Charles today, but no less information. Ted Turner perhaps is going to have an unhappy Father's Day when he figures out he's been involved in a massive financial fraud.
Thanks again, Jason.
Very good. See everybody tomorrow. Thanks for watching.